Well, hi there. It is half past midnight. Oops. And time to show up. Well past time to show up. Like hours past time to show up. I'm showing up. I'm glad you showed up. I appreciate every single one of you. Do the little YouTube dance, like, comment, subscribe, all that happy horse shit, and let's shit in the box. I have been thinking. I've been thinking about a thing. Now, obviously, I have kind of lost track of time because that's the thing that I do, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the thing that I'm thinking, the thing that I'm thinking. I have been musing over the high level notion of what I am looking to do with the enemy AI in this game. Like, what is it that interests me about, well, just about the game, about the entire concept of horde survival roguelites. Why am I building one? Why is it that I think building one can be interesting? What do I think can be done? I've already got like a couple of like minor mechanical bits, but what is it really that interests me about this type of game? Because that's kind of, from a design standpoint, this is the important thing. This is the important thing that you want to focus on. You want to find the thing in the game's design that is interesting. And you want to drill into it and say, what can I do with this? What can I say with this mechanic that nobody else has said, that nobody else has done? Even if they have done it, can I say this part with that part in a way that creates a whole new thing? And I want to talk about that in a little bit more detail, and I want to I'm going to draw a bunch of diagrams in Clip Studio Paint at some point, and I apologize for that because I know that's not an especially popular thing that I do, but it takes up less space than a whiteboard, okay? And I understand that my handwriting is fucking garbage, okay? I have dysgraphia. A lot of people don't understand what that is. Dysgraphia is literally an inability to write. And what it comes from is that it comes from developing verbally substantially before you develop fine motor coordination. So the language centers of your brain, particularly Broca's region, are just not very well connected to your hands and your fingers. And that makes it hard to draw words. Every time you learn a new thing, you kind of like integrate it with the stuff that you already know. And if you have already developed some fine motor skill and some artistic skills before you learn to read and to talk, then your motor skills and your verbal skills kind of become intertwined. When you're learning those things around the same time, that's a useful thing. I learned to read and to talk substantially before I got to do any drawing or painting or anything like that. Because my mother's a fucking freak about mess. Everything's a mess. She didn't want me to have markers or pencils or paints because I would use them to make marks on things that I shouldn't make marks on. And she hated that idea so much that I just didn't have access to those things for a long time. what I did have access to was books, and my mother loved to read. And you know what reading is? It's quiet. It's quiet and it's neat and it doesn't make a mess. And if you hand a child a book and they sit in the corner and shut the fuck up, a lot of adults regard that as ideal. So you can call this abusive if you want. I definitely consider it formative. And I think that actually did some great things for me as a general human being. So anyway, because my motor skills and my language centers didn't end up very well connected, I can't really write. What I can do, thankfully, is I can spell real good. And I'm actually fairly talented at drawing, believe it or not. So, as long as you don't expect me to write in cursive, I can draw letters fairly well. But I'm still kind of stuck at this third grade level of handwriting. And it kind of looks like shit. And it's always been like that, and there's not a whole lot I can do. As far as I'm concerned, if you can read it, that's fine. A large part of this is that I need to slow down. If I slowed down, that would help, but I don't. I was constantly like racing against the clock to try and like draw all the letters as fast as possible, you know, whereas an average person would write the word apple, I have to go apple, A-P-P-L-E, and I have to make all of the marks. I have to know how an A is constructed, whether it's a capital or lowercase. I have to know how to construct a P and how to construct another P and the L and the E, and I gotta do all of that really, really quickly, and it's not easy, and it's not something that's simple to do, but it's how I got through school. And they used to yell at me. They used to say, "You're not supposed to print everything. You're supposed to learn how to write." Writing is cursive writing. It's always cursive writing. It has to be cursive writing. And I used to get marked down on my papers for that. And they would say, "You're being marked down for your penmanship." And I'm like, I don't fucking care. So I got a lot of C's in school where I should have gotten A's. But even though I did the assignment and did it well, I lost 1 point for not writing in cursive, and I lost another point for not doing a very good job of printing. And you know, that turns an A to a B because I didn't write, and to a C because my printing is kind of butt. And I didn't fucking care. Eventually, I ended up typing everything on a computer anyway, so, you know. C student in English, C student in composition, C student in history because of all the essay questions. Failed geography pretty much every fucking time, because in retrospect, you know, I look back on it, we moved around a lot when I was a kid. We moved around a lot because my dad was like, you know, military, and we moved around a lot, and it was still unusual because he would go TDY and he would bring his family with him, and it's like, that's not normal. And I don't know the reason behind that, but it's fairly clear to me from just like context clues that my dad didn't do what he says he did in the military. He did something else. And I'm probably not allowed to know what he did. So yeah, anyway, for any, in any case, for any reason, whatever, I'm aware that my handwriting is not very good. I don't need anybody to yell at me for it. And I'm aware that it's not the greatest thing to aware that it's not the greatest day. Anyway, I was trying to say something about geography. Because we moved around a whole lot, I think most people learn geography by knowing what's next door to them first. And then they learn what's next door to the people that's next door to them. Like, if you're living in France, you learn that Spain is next door over there, and Italy is next door over there, and Belgium is next door over there. But I didn't live anywhere long enough for the places next door to stay next door. And that just kind of fucked up my entire perception of where things were in the world. Like, I would go, oh, that country's right next door. Because I'd be like, oh, Spain's next door to France. But we weren't in France anymore. Now we were in, like, Italy. And it'd be like, okay, so what countries to the west, or whatever the fuck? Oh, that's Spain. No, that's France, you fucking dumbass. Oh, shit, that's right. We're in a different country now. Nobody would be asking what countries to the west of Italy because it's a peninsula. Italia Pinest Insula. But yeah, I'm digressing. I'm going off on various tangents, and the actual thing that I'm thinking about is I'm thinking about kind of this triangle of what economics actually represent, and I know I talk about economics fairly frequently, but here's the thing, okay? You got this sort of triangle of things, okay? And up on the one side you have agency, the ability to make a choice, and over here on the other side you have values. And values, well, that's about which choices are good and which choices are bad. And then down here you have emergence. Now, an emergent system is a system that you don't actually build explicitly. It's a system that arises out of multiple parts. And here's what interests me about horde survival games. It's the same thing that interests me about flocking simulators. It's the same thing that interests me about Conway's Life. Cellular automata are an emergent phenomenon. And agency and values, these are the things that create the underlying system. So you've got an enemy, and that enemy has a goal, okay? And at any given time, that goal could be any number of things. The obvious goal is you want to attack the player. So this is the player. But in addition to attacking the player, you also want to gather around a leader. Now, this is one of the things that I've kind of come up with from a mechanical perspective. Okay, we've got this leader, and the idea of a leader is it's the enemy with the highest level. But I don't assign explicit levels to the enemies. The enemies gain levels by collecting experience, the same way that the player does. So the enemy also has an interest in panties. And the relative values of these things are what really make the difference here, okay? And like, at any given point in time, what we have to do is we have to identify, first of all, who is the topmost leader with high level. We also have to identify the closest pair of panties. And of course, we have to identify where the player is. Now, the idea here is every single enemy on every single clock loop has to go, okay, on the one hand, I want to follow the leader. Okay? On the other hand, I want to get some panties so I can be the leader. And finally, my ultimate goal is I want to attack the player and kill him. The reason you want to go after the leader is because the leader is going to give you the best chance of killing the player. A horde of enemies around the leader is going to give the enemy the best chance of killing the player and taking her panties. Remember, that's the goal. The panties are always the goal. The thing that every single enemy actually cares about, the one thing that they ultimately want, they want the panties. They want all the panties. So, they want to pick up any panties that are nearby. If there are panties nearby, then they want to grab those panties so they can gain levels and become the leader. If they don't have panties nearby, they want to go and follow the leader. They want to follow the leader because the leader is going to do damage to the player. And as the leader does damage to the player drops panties. And as the player drops panties, the enemies all want to be in that vicinity so that they can pick up the panties when the player drops them. Ultimately, of course, they want to attack the player, and they want to make the player drop panties themselves so they can collect those panties and ultimately get the last pair of panties that the player has. This all sounds completely fucking absurd. But the whole concept here is the game will unfold very differently depending on the values we put on these. How far away can the player be before the enemy would rather look for a leader instead? If you've got a player over here and a leader over here, okay, so we'll label this P and we'll label this L. Here's our leader and here's our player. Now we have our enemy is sitting somewhere in the middle, okay? You measure this distance and you measure this distance. Now, obviously, one of these distances is going to be shorter, okay? And if you take the player's distance and you subtract the leader's distance, you would get some number X. And this number X you'll get a positive X if the leader is closer. And you'll get a negative X if the player is closer. Now, if the player is closer, obviously you want to go for the player, okay? But if the leader is closer, how much closer does the leader have to be before the enemy will go to the leader instead of to the player? And then you have that same calculation that goes on for panties. If there's panties nearby, how close do the panties need to be before the enemy will go for the panties and not for the player? Now, the way I've got it right now, the enemy just goes for the player. The enemy doesn't go for shit other than that. But from a strategy perspective, if the enemy is far from the player but close to some panties, they should go for the panties so that they can become stronger. I'm not sure right now nobody levels up. The player doesn't level up, the enemies don't level up, nothing. There's no such thing as a leader, but I'm going to need to install some kind of level up system. And this level up system is going to produce a situation. I'm done drawing diagrams for the moment. This level up situation is going to produce a scenario where now the enemy is not pursuing the player. The enemy is pursuing the closest available source of panties. And really what it should be the largest number of panties in close proximity. So like if there's a pile of 12 panties over here, the enemy should go for that instead of the pile of 2 pairs of panties over here. And if the player has more panties than anything, as the player goes up in level, the player should become more interesting. It should become much more attractive to chase the player as the player goes up in level, just like it becomes more attractive to chase the leader when the leader goes up in level. So really what we're looking at is how these relative values are assigned. And this is the thing that interests me about this game. I don't think most people put any kind of like priorities or flocking behavior in here, because fundamentally it's like you take Boyd's, the flocking simulator, okay? If instead of collision detection, we say that the enemy is going to move toward the leader but not get closer than some margin to another enemy, including the leader. They're going to move toward the leader, but they're also going to move away from the enemies near them. This is going to make the horde much, much larger because they'll spread out instead of collecting together. And that larger horde is going to present a greater threat. And if the horde gets large enough, we could conceivably have a scenario where the horde overflows to the opposite side of the screen. So if the horde gets big enough, no, I would have to get so big for that. That's fucking ridiculous. I don't even need to check for that. That's like, it's not even possible. I don't know. Could that happen? How many members would need to be in the horde to, oh, it'd need to be like 600 deep. Yeah, that's not going to happen. We're going to have performance problems long before that. I don't need to worry about that, because worrying about that is going to slow down the entire game as a whole when we're already talking about this is a thing that only matters when the game is already getting close to a theoretical maximum of how many enemies it can support. So anyway, there's a whole question of if the leader is closer than the player, how much closer does the leader have to be before the enemy will go to try and get closer to the leader? And now that I think about it, I think that needs... God damn it, I'm going to need spatial partitioning. I keep telling myself I don't have to build a spatial partitioning system, but I think I do. I think I do need to build spatial partitioning. I think that, I think what I ultimately need to do is I think I need to identify, I think I need to identify the space on the map that has the most panties in it. Modify that by the distance from the enemy. Okay. I have kind of the beginnings of an algorithm taking shape in my head here. So let's go ahead and get rid of that. So we've got the playing field right here, okay? And we've got the enemy is right here. So we're working from the enemy's perspective. And this would be divided up And we'll divide it up into, like, I don't know, 9 by 9, okay? So we got right here. Here is the enemy, and I think what we want to do, I think we want to go, how many panties are in each of these squares? We find the squares with the most panties. Okay, we count how many panties there are in each square. Like we'll say there's 5 over here, and there's 3 over here, and there's 12 over here. And then having done that, we calculate the distance. This would be 1, 2, 3, 4 taxi cab distance, and this would be 1, 2, 3 taxi cab distance again. 1, 2, 3, 4, again a 4. So what we'd have is we'd have 5 minus 4. That's effectively 1 pair of panties over here, and we have 3 minus 3, which is effectively no panties over here. And then over here we've got 12 minus 4, which would be the equivalent of 8 panties in this space over here, and then that we could head in that direction. And I think we could focus down on that. I think we could I think we could sort that. We've only got 81 things to sort that. It'd be fairly simple. And we can cache this. We can cache number of panties. And then we can just check distance. We can check distance by checking the coordinates, and using taxicab distance is fine. But we don't actually need to use taxicab distance. What we can do is we can use distance squared. Distance squared is the same as the hypotenuse, like right here. Okay, so like we've got 2 and we've got 1. 2 squared plus 1 squared equals 5. So what we have here is, that's the square root of 5 is that. And then over here we've got 3 squared plus 1 squared equals 10. So we've got the square root of 10. And over here we've got 2 squared plus 2 squared equals square root of 8. And we don't actually need to take the square roots because we know the square root of 10, the square root of 5, the square root of 8. The square root of 10 is going to be more than the square root of 8. The square root of 5 is going to be less than the square root of 8. So we know that, and we could start with that. You know, we could start with, we could take this square root of 10, and then we could square the number of panties. So you could say there's 144 pairs of panties there. And we could subtract, no, that wouldn't work. So if we're going x minus y, that's x squared minus 2x plus x squared minus 2xy plus y squared. We could work that out. We could simplify that, and we can make that part of the calculation. Or we could just subtract the distance squared. We could just go, you know, we got 5 panties over here, and that's the square root of 5. So we just subtract 5 minus the distance squared is 5, and that comes out of 0. And then we go 3 minus the square root. That's the square root of 10. So 5 minus 10 gives us a minus 5. 3 minus the square root of 5, that gives us a minus 2. And then the 12 minus the square root of 8 gives us a 4. We still end up with relative amounts. Well, premature optimization is the root of all evil, but at the same time, yeah. We could look for literally anything positive. We could probably using a spatial partitioning system, we could use the distance on the perimeter. We could say it's on a perimeter this far distant. We could check these 8 areas right here. And then we could check these. That'd be what, 16? Yeah, that'd be 16 areas there. This would be 24. Huh. Well, I don't really need to work out the details of it right now. When you're actually working out the details, there's a lot of stuff that you honestly can't work out until you're actually looking at it and working on the code, and you have to test it out, and you go, wow, that doesn't work for shit. I can't do that. Taxi cab distance kind of works. I could just use taxi cab distance. That'll be fine. The difference between taxi cab distance and distance squared is not that it's not that big a deal until you start getting farther away. And when you start looking at farther and farther distances, then yeah. Now I've done some forward thinking on this. I've already done some looking into how to work on this. How to build this. I've done some forward thinking in writing the code. All of my enemies have a target that is currently defaulted to the player. So right now they always chase the player, but I've always had it established that they may have a different target than the player, and they can head in the direction of that target. And I can just go, is there a new and better target? And I can actually start with the target I've got. I can start with the target I've got, and then I could rapidly check the I wonder. I'm thinking about something. I have previously established that I don't really want to do multiple dropped panties combining into one pair of panties, but I think I need to change that. I think I need to change that so the panties stack. Or do I? I don't know. But this is just like this half-baked thing that I'm thinking about, and because I've been thinking about it, I've been just kind of lost in this consideration of the design factors involved in it. Anyway, that's why I've been like sitting around for hours thinking about this particular question and how I can build it and how I can solve it and what I can do and whether that's going to do something interesting. Because I try to simulate this in my head and like, you know what it would look like. If you can imagine a scenario, you can go, the player's over here and the leader's over here, the panties are over here, and you can work this out and you can go, which of these will offer me the most panties in the fastest time? I want to get as many panties as I can as fast as possible. And You can do that with one. But what does it look like when you've got 50 of them? I don't know, man. I can't hold all that in my head. I can't think about all of that in my head all at once. And I'm also thinking about it and I'm going, pretty much every time the player drops panties, there's going to be a member of the Horde nearby to pick them up. Pretty much every time a member of the Horde drops panties, there's going to be a member of the Horde there to pick them up, or the player is immediately going to run over and pick them up. So maybe I never need the enemies to look for actual panties on the ground. Maybe I just let them pick up what they happen to pass by, and the only thing they pursue is a leader or the player with the most panties. And the leaders in turn will try to collect around the biggest leader. That would just happen all by itself. If you just have everybody go, I'm going to chase after the player if the player's close enough, and if not, I'm going to chase after the leader with the most panties. Eventually, it ends up everybody's chasing after the leader with the most panties, and the leader is the closest to the player. So the greatest threat is at the leading edge of the Horde, immediately followed by the rest of the threat. And you get kind of this situation where you've got the strongest enemy and the next strongest enemies. They'll just kind of automatically organize themselves in that fashion. Just because, and that's how emergent behavior works, and that's why it fascinates me, and that's why I want to do this this enemies can level up thing, and then you can manipulate it by where and how you spawn the enemies. You can change the behavior of the Horde by changing the behavior of the player around the Horde by manipulating the way you generate the Horde. And I really want to get these menus looking good so I can see what that looks like. So I got these ideas, and these ideas are going to be fun, and I really want to see what happens. That's why I love emergent behavior. That's the thing that I love most of all about emergent behavior in a game is, I don't know, man. I don't know what's going to happen. I can't tell what it's going to look like until I see it. I got to build it, and I got to run it, and I got to see what happens. And then I got to see, like, what else can I do with this? What else can I change with this? One of the things that I keep going back and forth on is if you play Vampire Survivors, you'll notice something. None of the enemies have collision. They can go right into each other. They can go right through all the obstacles on the screen. Because there are so many of them that many collisions, that's an ON squared algorithm. That doesn't work well. You can improve that with spatial partitioning. And I'm thinking about building spatial partitioning for that exact reason. God damn it. There were problems I would have to solve to build spatial partitioning, and I don't... Okay, it's not accurate to say I don't want to solve those problems. It's, I don't think solving those problems is going to look cool. Solving those problems is going to be interesting, and it's going to be fun. It's going to engage my mind. It's going to be something cool to think about. It's going to be something I think is cool to talk about, and I think the average person who watches videos is going to go, oh my God, who fucking cares? I don't think anybody wants to hear about how you build a spatial partitioning system. I don't think anybody wants to hear about what problems I had. I don't think anybody wants to hear about how I solved them, because I will frequently solve things in a way that other people go, that's not elegant at all. That's true. I like to solve problems with brute force because it's easy. And if you waste a bunch of time trying to solve a problem you don't have yet, that's just wasted fucking time. People get mad at me for my solutions that work. They go, that's not, you should have done a better, this one works. Yeah, but if you did, you could have a 300 frame rate. I don't care. I'm going for 60. If I can get 80, that's great. To be perfectly honest, I'm fine with 30. If the game has a frame rate of 30, I'm cool. And if anybody else goes, 30 frames a second, dude, grow the fuck up. You don't need more than 30 frames a second. A movie's 24. Well, it's different when you're playing the game. Not really, no. No, you'll be fine. You'll be fine all the way down to 15, honestly. Most people find most games perfectly playable all the way down to 12 frames a second. Horrifying, isn't it? Most people are fine with that, unless they get their panties in a wad about, I want a better frame rate. Game typically works all the way down to that, so I'm going for 5 times that. I'm looking for the 60 frames a second. I want it to hit your monitor's refresh rate at least, so you can turn VSync on and not see any drop. But, yeah, I'm not concerned about doing things in the most optimal way possible. I'm concerned about making the game fun, I'm concerned about making the game work, and I'm concerned about keeping things simple and readable enough that when shit breaks, I can go look at it and go, oh yeah, I know what broke. I don't have a problem with writing complex code. I would just rather not do it if I don't have to, because I'm going to have to. If you add complex code you don't have to write on top of complex code you do have to write, you end up writing a lot more complex code, and it's wasting a lot of time you could have spent on the complex code you actually have to write. Anyway, that's where I am. That's what I'm thinking. That's the stuff that's interesting me at the moment. So again, do the little YouTube dance, like, comment, subscribe, all that happy horse shit, and okay, bye.